The story opens with Takeru Kamishiro dragging himself through the same commute to the same dead-end job day after day in his dull, joyless life. People always told him that sticking to routine was the path to happiness, but deep down, a part of him longed for something different, just like everyone. One evening, as he stares at a strange scene flickering on his television, he suddenly finds himself transported somewhere completely unexpected. Then a mysterious man appears before him, claiming to be overseer of the entire solar system. Kamishiro stares in bafflement and asks if that makes him some sort of alien. The figure shakes his head, saying he's closer to a deity, then shows Kamishiro a planet known as Madeus. No matter what is tried, Madeus fails to prosper and its civilizations rise and collapse over and over again. The cycle of failure has lasted too long, and the man has decided on a radical approach. He's gonna hit the planet with just one single drop of water because even that tiny amount can stir up massive waves that flip the world upside down. And to Kamishiro's shock, he has been chosen to become that drop of water. Kamishiro is overwhelmed by the weight of this duty, but the deity calmly explains that he's no longer alive anyway. If he refuses, his soul will simply fade into nothingness. But to sweeten the choice, the deity offers him abilities and any powers he desires. He starts by granting Kamishiro magic and an endless supply of mana, but then he stops and asks what else Kamishiro wants for himself. At once, Kamishiro's fear turns to excitement. Grinning, he declares that he wants a cute harem to join him on this journey. To his delight, the deity assures him that he'll meet them eventually, then continues stacking on more perks. He enhances Kamishiro's search skills, allows him to earn money by selling harvested materials, and gives him a special bag that can hold everything he gathers. He also grants him universal language comprehension, along with resistances to strengthen his defense. Before long, Kamishiro's form begins to fade, and his transfer is about to begin. The deity pauses, wondering aloud if he might have overloaded Kamishiro with too many blessings, but it's too late to undo them. Still, unease flickers across his face when he glimpses the partner Kamishiro is destined to meet, so he questions whether it will truly be alright. Kamishiro panics at his words, but there's no time left for answers, and the deity only tells him that everything will be fine, just before Kamishiro vanishes. A second later, Kamishiro opens his eyes in a brand new world, now inside a brand new body. He has no real clue what the hell he's meant to do, so he heads off to find a spot where people are. Before long, he comes across a village, but quickly realizes he won't be able to buy food without any cash. That's when he remembers the deity had boosted his search ability so he could track down materials to sell. Kamishiro tries activating the search magic, but nothing happens, leaving him disappointed. After a second thought, he realizes he was pronouncing it wrong because the moment he says it correctly, glowing symbols appear all around him. These markings highlight where materials are located, and when he says the word scan, more detailed information shows up. Thrilled with how useful the ability is, Kamishiro feels lucky when the very first item he picks up turns out to be ranked B. He then spends more time collecting everything that pops up under the ability, but most of them end up being junk. Almost all are marked as E rank, though one strange shiny rock catches his attention. It looks valuable because of how polished and bright it seems, only to reveal itself as an ant's poop. He's baffled why it gets ranked as a C, but still satisfied, since he learns the things he can sell are sorted by different marks, and his search skill points them out easily. With his bag now stuffed full, Kamishiro rushes off to the village, eager to see how much cash he can make. At the gate, the guard assumes he's a knight because of how ridiculously tall he is, but Kamishiro quickly explains he's just a material gatherer. The guard, who introduces himself as Marlowe, says that kind of work is rare, and though the village doesn't have a shop specialized for materials, they do have a general store. So our boy heads straight there, and when he shows the shopkeeper the poop, the man's eyes practically sparkle. He identifies it as droppings from a hammer anteater, and is absurdly impressed by its perfect shape and rich color. Praising Kamishiro for finding such a fine specimen, he offers him 5 gold coins for it. Kamishiro has no idea what that's worth, so the shop owner explains, a single night in the inn costs 500 raves and 1 gold coin equals 1,000 raves. Kamishiro quickly calculates in his head and realizes the man's about to pay him the equivalent of 50,000 yen for literal crap. When Kamishiro accepts, the shopkeeper gets overly excited and even rubs the damn thing on his cheek like it's treasure, making Kamishiro stand there in disbelief that someone is cherishing a freaking ant poop. Kamishiro then lays out the rest of his haul, and the shopkeeper stares in disbelief that Kamishiro managed to gather everything on his own. He questions why someone would bring such valuable loot to a backwater shop, but Kamishiro casually replies that he just likes wandering around while collecting whatever he can find. Impressed by his talent, the man decides to ask a favor. He explains there's a vein of mithril hidden in the nearby mountains, and he wants Kamishiro to retrieve it. Kamishiro lives for adventure, so he agrees. The man then counts out 360,000 raves for the lot. Doing the math nearly knocks Kamishiro out cold, because that's about 3.6 million yen. But before letting him go, the merchant warns him that there are monsters in the mountains, but he's confident Kamishiro can handle himself. But before heading up there, Kamishiro spends the night at an inn where a young girl brings him a simple bowl of water. The cost is 30 raves, and Kamishiro is baffled when she explains it's for washing himself. Naturally, he'd prefer a bath, but he nearly loses it when she tells him there are no baths here at all. Sorcerers sometimes offer cleaning spells, but the town doesn't have any. Hearing the word magic sparks an idea in Kamishiro's head, so he pays for the water and sends the girl away. Once alone, he experiments with a few chants, and the moment he says clean, the spell activates, and in an instant, he feels fresher than he ever has in his entire life. That's when he realizes he can cast basically any spell as long as he figures out the right word for it. On the road to the mountain, Kamishiro begins to get used to his new skills, and he's startled when he suddenly sees a spade symbol appear for the first time. Excited, he goes to check it out, only to be horrified when it leads him to a skeleton. His ability even reveals the person's name, their rank, and details of their past, and what stands out most is a family amulet lying beside the remains. His magic shows that it was handmade by the man's mother, and when Kamishiro reads the letter tucked inside, his chest tightens. It's a heartfelt note from the man's sister begging him not to overwork himself. Feeling he can't just walk away, Kamishiro carefully buries the skeleton before moving on to another area. There he creates a protective barrier, tosses several herbs he picked earlier into a bowl, adds seasoning, and finishes it off with some meat. When he takes a sip of the stew, Kamishiro is blown away by how good it tastes. Laughing to himself, he declares that getting thrown into another world might just be the best thing that has ever happened to him. Soon, Kamishiro arrives at the Forest of Ancient Dragons, a deadly region crawling with dangerous creatures. Kamishiro then casts a light spell to illuminate the symbols around him, but he notices there's no aura anywhere. He doesn't even spot a single animal, and he wonders if maybe it's because he reeks so badly. Kamishiro just rolls with it since it means nothing will jump him, and he exhales in relief when the edge of the forest comes into view. Unluckily, it also happens to be the end of the ground under him, and Kamishiro plunges straight off a cliff. He frantically blurts out every magic word he can think of, but none of them do shit. Float does nothing, levitate is useless, but when he finally yells fly, the spell activates. Kamishiro lands safely below and cheers when he sees ore symbols glowing all around. He immediately starts gathering whatever he can, but he still doesn't turn up any mithril ore. Eventually, he spots a faint mark deep inside the mountain wall, so Kamishiro says blaze and hurls a fireball to blast it open. It works flawlessly, revealing mithril at last, though not in large amounts. The cave then begins rumbling, threatening to collapse, but Kamishiro stubbornly presses deeper. He eventually discovers a chamber with water so pure it leaves him stunned, and the scan reveals it as double S rank, making it the most precious resource he's seen yet, and the description says the water holds the magical essence of an ancient dragon, meaning a dragon must be living here. Kamishiro chooses not to panic and starts preparing to collect as much as possible, but before dumping out the plain water in his container, he decides to test if the dragon water is even drinkable, so he scoops up a handful. At that moment, a massive dragon bursts out of the pool, and he's pissed that Kamishiro hasn't acknowledged his presence. Kamishiro freezes in shock, while the dragon is equally shocked that Kamishiro managed to endure his oppressive aura. Panicking, Kamishiro quickly kneels on the ground and apologizes for barging into the dragon's home, and the beast respects his courage. Kamishiro introduces himself, stating plainly that he's human, but the dragon struggles to believe it. He explains that the mana radiating from Kamishiro was so overwhelming that it shook him awake from his deep sleep. Kamishiro doesn't get what the hell he's saying, but the dragon clarifies that the amount of mana pouring out of him could actually match his own or even exceed it. The ancient dragon calls himself Voldius, and he states that he has a favorite ask of him. Voldius recognizes the clean, raw power in Kamishiro, and it makes him believe that Kamishiro might be able to rouse his child. And naturally, the dragon isn't expecting him to do it for nothing, so he promises to hand over a heap of mithril ore in exchange. Voldius presents our guy with the egg that refuses to hatch, but Kamishiro has no idea what the hell he's supposed to do. So Voldius tells him to channel his mana into it the same way he produced his light. Kamishiro then speaks the word heat to warm it, but he panics when a freaking massive force erupts all around him. Something's obviously off, but Voldius bursts into laughter. Kamishiro's body begins to be dragged into the egg, and he thinks about how he only just reached this world, and he was hoping to see more of it before he died. Moments after, Kamishiro ends up in a weird place, and a voice calls him reckless. Kamishiro wonders if this is the deity from before, but realizes it's someone else. This girl says she has been tinkering with this planet for tens of thousands of years, but it only took Kamishiro one day to cause a massive ripple, and she isn't happy about that. Kamishiro has no idea what this girl is even getting at, but the girl simply casts him away. Kamishiro is bewildered when he returns to the world, but relieved when he sees that he managed to make the egg hatch. Voldius asks Kamishiro to name the newborn, but Kamishiro isn't sure if he should. Voldius says it's fine because the child already has its true name, and he only wants Kamishiro to give him his everyday name. Kamishiro agrees to it and christens the baby dragon B for Black. Then Voldius tells B to roam the wide world as much as he desires, and the hatchling immediately joins Kamishiro's party. Kamishiro notes that the little guy was just born and questions whether it's smart for Voldius to let him leave with a stranger like him. But Voldius isn't concerned, and he points out that Kamishiro is stronger than he is and he feels safe in trusting his child in his care. Voldius then delivers Kamishiro's reward by firing a beam at his magic bag, then bids him farewell. Kamishiro then formally asks B if he will come with him on his gathering journey, and the tiny dragon chirps his agreement. Kamishiro couldn't be happier, but before setting off, he takes a moment to use magic to clean up his new partner because the funky little dragon stinks like hell. Kamishiro reaches the surface, bringing B along for his very first experience of the outside world. Since traveling through the forest at night can be risky and his stomach is already growling, Kamishiro decides they'll just make camp and rest until morning. Inside Kamishiro's item box, we find that he's carrying a stash of double S-ranked elemental water. This isn't just ordinary water, it's saturated with magical essence drawn directly from an ancient dragon's overflowing power, so it's crucial for raising a young dragon like B. In fact, Kamishiro's stash is linked directly to the underground lake, thanks to Voldius. So he tells B to drink as much as he likes because they've got an unlimited supply, and Kamishiro wants the little guy to grow up strong and healthy. B then insists Kamishiro take a sip too, and when he does, he's amazed by the water's clarity and purity. Before night fully sets in, Kamishiro uses a few enchanted stones to form a protective barrier around their site. According to a book he picked up from Jerome's shop, these stones are highly valuable. But thanks to the divine blessings he received, Kamishiro can produce them without much trouble. Curious about how they work, he uses one to ignite a fire and starts preparing dinner. He then seasons a cut of meat with care and throws together a hearty stew. It's only his second attempt at cooking this dish, but it tastes so good he feels like he could eat it every day. B can't stop staring at the bubbling pot, clearly mesmerized by the aroma, so Kamishiro serves him a portion and warns him to wait because it's still hot. But the impatient hatchling dives right in and ends up burning his tongue. Acting like a proper guardian, Kamishiro cools it down first, and this time B is able to enjoy every bite. With a full belly, B winds down peacefully, and Kamishiro feels relieved knowing he can eat solid food too, because it means he won't be surviving on water alone, and Kamishiro can start trying new recipes for them to enjoy together. Kamishiro then wonders if B misses his father, but B responds by gently hugging him. Kamishiro gets the message that it doesn't matter where they are as long as they're together. The little dragon's affection is enough to make anyone melt, and Kamishiro finds it hard to believe that something so small is classified as a B-rank threat. And that's not even mentioning B's wild skills and stats. Still, Kamishiro's not too focused on that because what matters is that B is still a child and children need direction and care. Switching into full parent mode, Kamishiro gently reminds B that even if he's stronger, that doesn't give him a free pass to act recklessly. He also mentions that Voldius would definitely be upset if anything happened to him, but B is already fast asleep. The following day, Kamishiro climbs his way back up the cliff he originally fell from and arrives at the same forest as before. This time, however, the place looks far less eerie than it did last night, leaving him puzzled over what might have changed while they slept. He shrugs it off, figuring it must be one of those strange enchanted forests, and makes his way back inside. Now seems like the perfect moment to do a little resource hunting, so Kamishiro reminds himself to look for materials around rank C. Activating his detection skill, he scans the area and sees glowing symbols appear above several items nearby, and he collects plenty of intriguing materials. Right then, B suddenly rushes over behind him, visibly shaken. Kamishiro triggers his scan again, but this time he tunes the ability toward locating hostile creatures. This exposes at least 7 foes in the vicinity, which is vastly different from the last time he was in the forest when there were none. Back then, Kamishiro figured his stench had been keeping things away, so now he assumes the scent must have faded. But regardless, they're in danger, and Kamishiro decides that clearing out monsters won't be a bad thing. There'll be good training, and there's always the chance they drop something useful. Right then, things escalate as a massive rock falcon swoops in from behind. It's listed as a C-ranked beast, but Kamishiro doesn't feel even slightly intimidated, and it actually looks pretty adorable compared to the nightmare that was Voldius. His ability shows a readout on the bird, and apparently its meat is incredibly fatty and sweet. That instantly grabs his attention because in Kamishiro's eyes, the creature just transformed into a giant walking ingredient. Wasting no time, Kamishiro throws up a protective barrier around himself and B, then conjures a barrage of ice lances. While he doesn't enjoy taking lives, he tells himself that if it's for survival, he has no choice. With that resolve, he fires the projectiles, piercing the bird with precision and celebrates fresh, high-quality meat secured. B nervously warns that the rest of the monsters have shown up, but Kamishiro only sees them as bonus ingredients. Before the beast can strike, he chants quick to boost his speed and reduction to lighten his frame. Launching into the air to avoid the first attack, Kamishiro coats both arms and legs in a hardening spell and slams down onto one of the monsters. His punches carry far more force than he expected after being reinforced, and his kicks are quite effective too as he smashes another wolf. Kamishiro is pleased with this new tall frame of his because kicks are far more effective with his extra long legs. After mowing through the rest of the pack, he pauses for a breather and begins collecting the mountain of premium meat he just earned. After collecting the materials, Kamishiro notices more monsters starting to close in from the distance. Realizing that pushing forward through constant combat isn't realistic, he pauses to think of a way out. B, overhearing his concern, flaps over and attempts to carry them both away, but it's not exactly easy. Kamishiro suggests trying a different tactic, but the determined hatchling refuses to give up and starts lifting his human companion with all his strength. Kamishiro is genuinely impressed by B's power and decides to help by casting a reduction spell on himself to make his body lighter. The result is a bit too effective, and the two end up soaring high into the sky. While calmly floating upward, Kamishiro tells B they're gaining too much altitude. In response, B lets go, causing Kamishiro to scream as he free falls toward the ground. But thankfully, B catches him just in time before he hits the earth, and Kamishiro is just relieved they both made it out safely. A quick glance at the map confirms they've traveled quite a long way, and he thanks B for his effort in getting them away from danger. Kamishiro reminds him that he's only human, so maybe next time the dragon should take it a bit easier, but B clearly doesn't understand what the fuss is about. Kamishiro brushes it off and says it's fine, then adds that he'll be depending on B again when the time comes. Delighted by the compliment, B squeezes Kamishiro in a hug so strong it nearly crushes him. As they continue walking, Kamishiro comments that the village is still several days away. B, however, seems far more interested in a stick Kamishiro has in his hand. It's just a branch he picked up earlier, but when Kamishiro scans it with his ability, it's revealed to be from Yggdrasil, the mythical tree of legend and ranked at doublest grade. Right then, B seems to get an idea and starts breathing all over the branch. Kamishiro watches in confusion, unsure what the little guy is up to, until suddenly the branch begins to transform into a staff. Apparently, B's breath is saturated with mana, and by enveloping the branch with it, he triggered its hidden potential. Now Kamishiro's left holding a fully formed magical staff, and he's told everyone he's just a low-key material collector, so the thought of being spotted carrying something like this makes him uneasy. It looks awesome, but Kamishiro's not exactly trying to look like some flashy spellcaster. Suddenly, a distant growl echoes through the trees, prompting Kamishiro to warn B to stay close. The sound is intense, so whatever's out there doesn't seem friendly. But instead of backing down, B darts forward, and Kamishiro has no choice but to chase after him. B gestures towards something up ahead, and Kamishiro is startled to discover an elf lying injured on the ground. At first glance, it looks like she might have been attacked by some creature, but the girl quickly clarifies that's not the case. Her stomach lets out an earth-shaking rumble, and Kamishiro realizes this is the terrifying beast he was worried about. She explains that she hasn't had a single bite in 3 days, though what she truly needs is water. Kamishiro hands over the last of his clean drinking supply, and the elf gratefully tells him he's just saved her life. Her hunger isn't going anywhere though, and Kamishiro suddenly remembers the boxed meal the innkeeper packed for him. When he offers it, the elf accepts without hesitation, and Kamishiro quietly notes that she's nothing like the graceful, elegant elves he read about in books. A moment later, he grows concerned when she suddenly stops eating, but it turns out she's just overwhelmed by how good the food tastes. She looks like she's seeing stars, whispering that she's reached heaven, though Kamishiro casually mentions that it's probably just because she was starving. With over-the-top flair, she claims she's been brought back to life by the taste alone. Still, Kamishiro feels something is a little off. They aren't that far from town, and certainly not far enough to completely run out of supplies. She tries to explain it away, saying she left in a hurry, but that excuse doesn't quite sit right either because most travelers pack food just in case. The elf gets irritated with the interrogation, but before she can come up with another excuse, he's hit by a foul smell that derails the conversation completely. He always imagined elves would smell like blooming flowers and crisp peppermint, not like livestock shit. Deeply offended, the girl snaps back, saying it's not her fault because she's been roughing it outdoors for days. Still frustrated by the insult, she thanks Kamishiro for the help, then storms off before he can say anything else. Once she's gone, Kamishiro returns to gathering materials. And as they finally reach the edge of the woods, just as they step out, the two are thrilled to see a passing carriage approaching right on time. Kamishiro stares in awe as the carriage rolls into view, not pulled by a horse, but by a freaking unicorn. While majestic, unicorns are surprisingly common in this world and only considered an E-rank creature. The driver spots Kamishiro's staff and asks if he's a magician of some kind, but Kamishiro quickly clears that up, saying he's nothing more than a material collector and trader. The man is even more impressed by this, noting that someone who specializes in gathering is a rare find. Kamishiro didn't expect that kind of response and quietly admits to himself that he wouldn't exactly call himself a specialist. The driver kindly offers him a ride back to the village, but Kamishiro hesitates, pointing out that he's a tall guy and might not fit comfortably. Fortunately, there's ample space inside, and the family turns out to be very warm and welcoming. Ever since arriving in this world, Kamishiro has noticed that children seem drawn to him. Now that he's practically a parent himself, he doesn't mind it at all. He just hopes he isn't being a burden, but the man reassures him that the village lives by a simple code: help those in need. It's a value the whole family shares, and Kamishiro quietly admires the courage it must take for kids to travel with their parents in such risky territory. The children are incredibly sociable, so Kamishiro gently reminds them not to trust people too quickly. He jokes that he could have been a thief for all they knew, but the boy grins and says he never had a doubt. Their family carries a small bell that rings whenever someone dangerous is nearby. It's a clever little tool, and Kamishiro wonders if he might be able to craft something similar himself. After exchanging names, they start to hear faint chirping coming from inside Kamishiro's coat. The kids get excited, eager to meet whatever kind of creature he's hiding, but Kamishiro warns them that it's no ordinary pet. Eliza curiously comments that monsters aren't anything unusual, and adventurers often travel with them, so there's no need to be so secretive. Kamishiro is relieved to hear that monster companions are common here, and he finally gives Bee permission to come out, with the added warning not to bite anyone. Bee pops out with a cheerful grin, and the parents are visibly startled to see an actual dragon. Seeing their reaction, Kamishiro quietly decides that it's probably best not to mention that Bee is the offspring of an ancient one. The family immediately assumes Kamishiro must be a dragon knight, given the fact that he's traveling with an actual dragon. Bee casually explains that he just stumbled across a dragon egg one day. That revelation shocks them even more, since getting a dragon to hatch is no small feat. In fact, for a human to pull it off is practically unheard of. As Bee tugs at Kamishiro playfully, he starts to realize just how unusual this little dragon truly is. Eliza points out that they rarely ever encounter dragon knights, and seeing a real dragon in the flesh is even rarer. Kamishiro, who's only ever seen dragon knights in RPGs, is sure he won't be able to stop staring if he ever meets one in real life. Later that evening, they settle down to make camp. Porin is impressed by the enchanted stones Kamishiro uses to ward off monsters. On top of that, Bee can sense danger before it gets too close, so Kamishiro reassures everyone that they'll be just fine through the night. When Eliza announces that it's time to eat, Kamishiro offers to cook for the group. She gives him the go-ahead, and the kids watch in amazement as Kamishiro starts pulling out a mountain of ingredients. They whisper among themselves, wondering if he's actually a mage, but Kamishiro laughs and tells them it's just a special item bag that can carry far more than it looks. He finishes preparing his go-to-meat soup, but this time he adds a side dish: a mushroom and vegetable salad. The presentation is mouth-watering, and the family dives in eagerly because none of them can remember the last time they had a meal that tasted this good. But just as everyone's enjoying themselves, something seems off with Porin. For a moment, everyone panics, thinking something's wrong, but it turns out the taste moved him to tears. After so many days eating nothing but dry jerky, seeing his children eating real food again overwhelms him. Porin can't hold back the tears, and Kamishiro chuckles at how dramatic he's being. Porin loudly declares that Kamishiro must be a mage and crowns him the Wizard of Flavor. The name gets a big laugh out of everyone, and the cheerful mood carries over into the night as someone pulls out an instrument to play a light tune. The entire family joins in, and the night is filled with music and joy. The warmth of the evening makes Kamishiro reflect. He realizes how many things he's missed out on. Sitting down to eat with others, laughing together, and enjoying the moment, it's a completely different feeling from eating alone in silence. For the first time since arriving in this world, Kamishiro feels a genuine laugh escape his chest. As night falls and everyone begins to sleep, Kamishiro says goodnight to Bee and peacefully gazes up at the stars above. The following day, Takeru wakes up early and starts cleaning his scissors to pass the time until it's time to move out. Porin lets him know they'll hit the road after breakfast, but Takeru brings up a small request. He's never had the chance to drive a carriage before, so he asks Porin if he can give it a shot. Porin doesn't see a problem with it and hands over the reins without hesitation. Not long after, they reach the village. Takeru hops down from the carriage and Porin thanks him for sharing his meals. But Takeru insists he's the one who should be grateful. After all, he didn't have to walk the whole way back by himself. With that, Poran and his group ride off, and as they disappear into the distance, Marlowe watches them go and quietly remarking that spring must finally be here. Takeru raises an eyebrow at the comment and asks what he means, so Marlowe explains that Poran is a weaver by trade. Every year he travels south to warmer lands for work, and the trip is always hard on his family. Since he can't hunt during those journeys, they barely get by on scraps, which explains why he was so thrilled to try Takeru's cooking. Realizing what Poran goes through, Takeru starts to feel lucky because his ability to collect ingredients and materials has made things much easier for him. Later that day, Takeru visits Jerome's shop to hand over the materials he had been tasked with collecting. As a small experiment, he quietly slits one piece of magic-infused mithril ore, the kind he picked up from the dragon's lair, into the batch of regular mithril, just to see how Jerome reacts. The shopkeeper takes his time, carefully inspecting every piece. Eventually, he pauses and points to the odd one out, declaring that it must be a rare magic-infused mithril. Jerome explains that a few chunks of this stuff hold enough magical power to replace most of the kingdom's standard magic stones. Takeru pretends to be surprised, though he already knew exactly what it was. Jerome is impressed that Takeru managed to stumble upon something so rare, but Takeru shrugs, saying he just happened to come across it during his trip. Jerome doesn't buy the modesty. Even if it was just lying around, being able to recognize and retrieve a stone like that takes skill. He tells Takeru that if he really wants to make the most of his abilities, he should head to Belkame, a major city with a much bigger market. As much as Jerome doesn't like the idea of letting go of someone with so much potential, Takeru would have access to a wider selection of goods and better opportunities there. He only asks that when Takeru eventually makes a name for himself, he remembers to send a few good customers back to his shop. Takeru wasn't really aiming for fame or recognition, but the idea of heading to a major city sparked his curiosity. Once he got back to the inn, he decided to learn more about Belkame. There he discovered that the city had a well-established adventurers guild, one that handled quests from across the entire nation. The adventurers were organized into various roles, combatants, support types, and other specialties. Since he was now living in a different world, Takeru thought it might be fun to experience life as an adventurer, traveling from place to place. He set his sights on joining the guild in Belkame, but before heading out, he still had some unfinished business here in Tormy. First, he made his way into town to drop off the monsters he captured so they could be processed. With that taken care of, he spent the rest of the evening celebrating with the villagers, eating, drinking, and enjoying their hospitality. The following day, Takeru returned to the butcher. By then, all of the monster parts had been cleaned and prepared, giving him more than enough food and spices to keep him stocked throughout his trip. The woman behind the counter said the village would feel a little emptier without him, and that a lot of locals had been hoping he might stick around longer. Takeru admitted he'd missed the place too, but there were still so many places he wanted to see and so many people left to meet. He couldn't stay in one spot just yet. The woman smiled and said she understood and that she wouldn't try to convince him otherwise. Before he left, she handed him a cloth bag. Inside, she packed a full set of meals for the road. Actually, it was more than just one. She'd stuffed the bag full of travel lunches. Takeru was touched, and it looked like food wouldn't be a concern for quite some time. Later, back in his room, there was only one thing left on his mind: what to do with the magic mithril ore. Jerome had told him it was far too valuable for him to buy, which left Takeru unsure of what to do with it. Throwing it away was out of the question, but since the ore contained a strong magical presence, he began to wonder if he could use it to create something useful for the village as a way to say thanks. That's when his eyes landed on the lamp sitting on his table and an idea clicked. He grabbed the magic ore and tried merging it with the lantern. It didn't take long before he figured out the right process, and with a burst of light, he succeeded in crafting a magical item. The following day, just as he was about to leave, the entire village gathered to see him off. Takeru thanked them for all their kindness. As a token of his appreciation, he presented the item he'd made. He explained that it was an enchanted tool designed to generate a protective barrier around the village, one that would repel anyone with harmful intentions. The villagers were stunned by the gesture. While they deeply appreciated it, some of them hesitated, wondering if it was really alright to accept something so rare and priceless. Takeru reassures everyone that it's perfectly fine because he considers it the least he can do to repay their kindness. And also he wants to make sure the village is still safe and intact if he ever decides to come back for a visit. Jerome, however, can't help but wonder what kind of power source is behind the device. Curious, he opens it up for a closer look, and sure enough, inside is the magic-infused mithril ore worth a fortune. He's about to object and say they can't possibly accept such a valuable gift, but by the time he turns around, Takeru has already slipped out the gate and disappeared down the road, so it's too late to return it now. As Takeru makes his way toward Belkame, he takes a moment to appreciate the quiet countryside. The breeze is calm, the view is peaceful, but that doesn't last. Up ahead, standing square in the middle of the road, is a giant crab that looks like Mr. Salta. At first, he's a bit taken aback, but once the surprise wears off, Takeru checks Mr. Sulfa's stats and quickly realizes there's nothing too threatening about it. What really grabs his attention is the line that says it's edible. With a smirk, he decides tonight's dinner is going to be seafood. He casts a body enhancement spell to get ready for combat. But before he could even throw a punch, B zooms past him and lets out a piercing sonic scream that knocks the crab out cold in one hit. Takeru is amazed because he had no idea B had that kind of power. But there's no time to celebrate yet as two more crabs appear out of nowhere. Thinking he's safe by standing in the center of the road since crabs are supposed to only move sideways, Takeru relaxes. That is, until the crabs charge straight at him. Turns out these ones can move forward just fine, and in seconds they flanked him. As the claws close in, B reacts quickly and lifts Takeru into the air. The two crabs crash into each other below, giving him a lucky escape. Takeru thanks B for his fast thinking, but the fight isn't over. The first crab has recovered and lunges forward in a blind charge. Takeru summons his staff and smashes the crab straight into the sky, finishing it off for good. With the danger cleared, it's time to start preparing the meal. Takeru hardens his arm into a blade-like edge and starts cutting off the crab's claws and legs. After a few minutes of work, everything's ready to be boiled. He pulls out an enormous cooking pot and tosses all the crab parts in. He adds water, a generous amount of salt, and lets everything cook for a few hours. When it's finally done, the two of them sit down to eat. The crab meat is delicious, sweet, rich, and perfectly cooked, so Takeru and B devour every bite. From now on, Takeru decides he's going to start hunting and eating as many monsters as he can. If every battle leads to a new kind of meal, then he's all in. After a few days, Takeru and B finally arrive at the gates of Belkame. He stops for a moment, taken aback by the sheer size and grandeur of the city's fortified walls. They're massive and beautifully built and far more impressive than anything he's seen so far. As he approaches, he notices a long line of travelers waiting to be inspected before entry. Takeru joins the line, but before it's his turn, he discreetly casts a spell to mask his magic bag because he figures it wouldn't be a great idea for the guards to find out he's carrying an item with infinite storage. When his name is called, Takeru is led into a separate inspection room by the guards. One of them begins checking through his belongings, while the other asks about the reason for his visit. Takeru replies that he's here to register with the Adventurers Guild. The guard nods, saying that makes sense because Belkame is home to the largest guild on the entire continent. He doesn't think Takeru looks suspicious, but protocol is protocol, so he tells Takeru they'll be running a scan using something called a virus. Takeru blinks because he's never heard of it before, so he asks how it works. The guard explains that a virus is a magical tool designed to detect if someone's hiding anything shady. Takeru agrees, and the guard holds out the device, scanning him from head to toe. After a few seconds, the results come in, and nothing out of the ordinary. Feeling curious, Takeru activates his ability and takes a peek at what the guard actually saw. The stat window pops up, showing that Takeru is marked as a magic user, nothing else. That's a relief because none of the powerful skills or blessings he got from the deity showed up, which means his secrets are still safe. The guards give him the all clear, but just before letting him go, one of them stops him with another question. It's not a serious issue, but he's curious why Takeru's stat window shows a blessing of the dragon's tag. Takeru calmly explains that it's probably because of his pet. He calls B out, and the tiny dragon emerges, and both guards are stunned by how adorable she is. Fortunately, there are no regulations against pet dragons in Belkame, so they give him permission to enter the city with her. The only condition is that she needs to wear some kind of tag or mark to show she belongs to him, in case something happens. Takeru didn't bring a collar, but then he remembers the lucky charm he received from Porin's kids a few days ago. He pulls it from his bag and carefully ties it around B's tail, and the guard nods in approval that it'll work. They mention that they'll still need to submit a formal notice to the mayor's office about a dragon being registered in the city, but that's their job, and Takeru doesn't need to worry about it. After returning his bag, they point him down the main road and tell him that if he keeps going straight, he'll eventually reach the Adventurers Guild. As Takeru steps into the city for the first time, he's blown away by how lively and beautiful it is, far beyond what he expected. Just then, B points her tiny claw toward a large building at the end of the main street. Judging by its size and design, it's definitely the Adventurers Guild. Without hesitation, Takeru heads over and steps inside for a look around. Not long after, a woman named Ariana walks up and greets him warmly, welcoming him to the Adventurers Guild Europa. They're always happy to welcome new members, so she invites him over to the front desk to begin the registration process. She hands him a form and asks him to write down his name and current job. It sounds simple, but for a moment, Takeru pauses and realizes something odd. He still doesn't understand how he can read and speak the language of this world so fluently. After filling everything out, Ariana follows up by asking if he has any experience with combat. Takeru casually mentions that he's taken down a griffin, fought off a bunch of wolves, and even handled a couple of oversized crabs. It all sounds a bit too convenient, and Ariana quietly wonders if he's exaggerating, so she asks if he has any proof. Takeru says he does, but warns her that it's kind of big. Ariana, thinking it's nothing serious, tells him to go ahead. To her absolute horror, Takeru pulls a massive crab from his inventory and drops it right on her desk. The sheer weight of it splinters the wood into pieces. He instantly realizes he might have gone a bit overboard, but in his defense, he did warn her. All the other adventurers quickly gather around to see what's going on. The guild master arrives, asking what the commotion is, so Takeru deadpan replies that he just wanted to show Ariana his crab. The guild master, staring at the ruined desk and giant crustacean, says he can see that. But he's more curious about how Takeru pulled it out so casually, and he suspects an item box. He asks where Takeru got it, and Takeru explains that it was a gift. The guild master activates his own ability to confirm. It's similar to Takeru's scan, but instead of a stat window, he can read a person's aura and judge their intentions. Takeru's aura gives off nothing suspicious, so he decides there's no need for punishment, just an honest mistake. He says they can appraise the crab and offer a payout by the end of the day, but Takeru surprises everyone again by saying he actually plans to eat it later. The entire guild goes silent, stunned by the statement. The crowd grows even larger, so Ariana hurries to wrap things up and suggests they move to the next room. Once they're seated at a different desk, Ariana tells him the crab definitely proved his strength, no doubt about that. She then finishes processing the paperwork and hands him his official guild armband. She admits that someone of his caliber should probably be starting at a much higher rank, but guild rules are strict, and every newcomer starts at F rank. That said, with skills like his, she expects him to move up fast. The following morning, Takeru locates the family of Beluria, the young man he had discovered deceased in the woods, in order to inform them of his passing and return a few of his personal belongings. Beluria's family is heartbroken, especially since they had warned him not to go adventuring, but he was determined to do so to afford medicine for his ailing father. Takeru can clearly see that the father is still gravely ill, and feeling the weight of their loss, he wants to find a way to support them. Later, he visits the guild to sell a collection of herbs, and the clerk is visibly impressed by the sheer size and quality of the mushrooms and leaves he's brought in. Right then, Ariana shows up looking for Takeru, and it seems he's gained a strong reputation around town lately, as several new job postings have specifically requested him by name. Takeru is glad to know that people hold him in such high regard, but with limited time, he explains to her that he'll only accept a few tasks for now. Following that, Takeru heads to the bathhouse for a long, soothing soak, and a short while later, Clay arrives and takes the spot directly beside him. Takeru is caught off guard by his appearance, since Clay usually doesn't show up around this time, but he mentions that rain's on the way, so he wanted to bathe early. While they're there, Clay brings up a question and asks if Takeru knows how to use healing magic, since there's been talk that he treated a sick man in the slums free of charge not long ago. Takeru confirms it's true, and Clay is genuinely shocked to hear it, considering that most healers ask for a hefty payment. As Takeru reflects on it, he begins to wonder whether the healers who do charge might hold a grudge against him for upsetting their business, but the fact that this is his only concern makes Clay chuckle. He then urges Takeru to take the official rank assessment so he can move up in rank, but Takeru replies that he's content with how things are and has no real desire to climb any higher. Clay recognizes that Takeru has a laid-back nature, but still cautions him that maintaining such a low profile could eventually attract the wrong kind of attention. As he gets up to leave, he advises Takeru to gain a better understanding of how the world operates. Later, Takeru returns to the guild with another batch of herbs, and the clerk sincerely thanks him for his consistent effort, though he once again wishes Takeru would pursue a higher rank, one that would be easily attainable for someone of his skill. Takeru, however, repeats that he's content right where he is and has no plans to rise beyond F rank. Right then, a sudden uproar erupts inside the guild as news breaks that a large horde of goblins has been sighted near the city. The guild master immediately issues a directive for all adventurers ranked D and above to prepare for combat. He then turns to the receptionist and inquires if any A-rank adventurers are available to participate in the operation, but unluckily most have already departed on various missions, leaving only one A-ranker in town, and it's Clay. The guild master breathes a sigh of relief, knowing they'll at least have the support of the Honorable Dragon King, so he instructs Muesli to go and notify Clay of the situation immediately. Takeru watches all of this unfold, and while he could probably wipe out the entire goblin force without breaking a sweat, he's only an F rank, so technically, there's no obligation for him to get involved, and honestly, he doesn't care to. Yet the guildmaster isn't fooled by Takeru's act, and he calls him out directly, making it clear that he's joining the mission whether he likes it or not. Not long after, once all the adventurers are assembled, the guildmaster outlines the details of the upcoming operation. The front lines are expected to form along the southwestern Stavlaw plains, and from there, the goblins will likely push toward Belkheim. To prevent any breach of the city walls, the plan is to intercept the horde at the Zalwis River before they get any closer. The adventurers appear fired up and eager to protect the city, though Takeru, for his part, would rather be anywhere else. Right then, two nearby adventurers notice that Takeru is listed as F rank and question why someone so low-ranked would be allowed to take part in an operation like this. At that moment, the guild master returns and admits he's not entirely sure either, and he just knows that his staff won't stop talking about how amazing Takeru is, so he figured it might be worth bringing him along. He acknowledges that he can't officially compel an F rank to join a combat operation, and doing so would put the Union on his back, but there's no rule against asking one to collect valuable monster materials in the field. With that, the guild master walks away and Muesli approaches to apologize to Takeru. She's just as confused as he is about why the guild master would drag an F rank into a battle, but yet she promises to do her best to support him out there. Takeru isn't sure what she means, so Muesli clarifies that she knows a bit of healing magic and will be assisting as a field medic. Takeru understands why she'd be brought along, but as he looks at how excited she is to charge into what could easily be a bloodbath, something in his gut tells him this mission is going to go sideways fast. Not long after, Takeru and Muesli arrive at the rear outpost, and the instant they get there, she gets startled by a bird and instinctively latches onto Takeru's arm. He politely asks her if she could let go, but Muesli is far too shaken to loosen her hand. She keeps insisting that she's not scared in the slightest, but Takeru is not buying it. He points out that they're stationed at a rear outpost well away from the actual battlefield, so the likelihood of her encountering any real monsters is minimal. He reassures her there's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling scared. After all, even the bravest warriors feel fear sometimes, so what matters is doing your best with whatever strength you've got. Moved by Takeru's words, Muesli brightens up, promises to give it her all, and dashes off toward one of the nearby tents. Just then, Clay steps out and can't help but laugh at how Takeru just gave an encouraging speech about courage when he himself was doing everything he could to dodge the battlefield earlier. Takeru acknowledges the irony in that, but explains that he simply prefers not to get involved in trouble unless absolutely necessary. And speaking of staying out of fights, Takeru was surprised to see Clay lingering at the rear base because he expected him to be out front with the others. Clay admits that some old wounds have started acting up and his body isn't holding up the way it used to. Takeru asks if he's referring to the scars he noticed on his back at the bathhouse. Clay tenses up for a second, expecting Takeru to judge him for carrying such disgraceful marks, but Takeru seems unfazed. Clay explains that scars on a warrior's back are seen as a stain on one's pride, and they suggest you were injured while fleeing from a fight. But Takeru doesn't view it that way, and he can tell those wounds were earned protecting someone. And the fact that he was badly injured yet still survived is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. Right then, a deep rumble echoes in the distance, the unmistakable sound of hundreds of footsteps drawing near. Clay immediately realizes that the guildmaster's frontline defenses must have been compromised and that the enemy is closing in fast, so he grabs a spear and tells Takeru he's heading out to intercept them. And even though his old injuries are flaring up again, Clay firmly declares that he'll defend Takeru no matter what, even if it costs him everything. Takeru tries to stop him, insisting it's not necessary, but Clay is already charging into battle. Takeru then glances over at the tent and spots Muesli in the middle of healing a wounded adventurer. Watching her push through her fear and continue helping others, even with the threat of the enemy closing in, makes him feel guilty for trying to take the easy way out. Right then and there, he resolves to do everything in his power to ensure everyone makes it home alive. He casts a protective barrier around the outpost to shield Muesli and the other healers from harm, and then heads out toward the front lines to face the goblins himself. Out on the battlefield, the adventurers are doing everything they can to hold the goblin forces back, but at this pace it's only a matter of time before the goblins break through and invade the city. Suddenly, Takeru charges onto the field and punches one of the goblins with such force that it gets launched straight into a big rock. It honestly unsettles Takeru to be fighting against humanoid creatures, but he doesn't have time to dwell on the morality of it, so he calls on B to handle the rest. B takes to the skies and unleashes a lightning spell, frying every goblin in the area in one powerful blast. With the threat neutralized for now, Takeru rushes over to check on the others and asks what happened. Diego explains that their formation had been holding strong at first, but the situation turned the moment a high-ranking goblin surgeon appeared. From there, everything started falling apart, but luckily Clay arrived just in time and managed to drive the goblin surgeon away. But in the chaos that followed, the group became separated from him, and now they have no idea where he is or if he's even still alive. Takeru immediately goes off to look for Clay, and near the edge of the forest, we finally find him, but barely standing and locked in a desperate fight against a swarm of goblins. Clay manages to take out a few using his spear, but the pain from his old injuries is flaring up badly, and it eventually brings him to his knees. The goblins seize the opening and rush him from behind. But before they can strike, Takeru arrives just in time and electrocutes them on the spot, saving Clay's life. Clay is stunned to see Takeru and yells at him to leave, insisting that it's far too dangerous to be here. But Takeru quickly points out that Clay's the one suffering from a serious injury and shouldn't be pushing himself this hard. Right then, the two hear the ominous footsteps of the goblin surgeon drawing near. It suddenly charges at them, but both manage to leap aside just in time. Retreating would be the safest option, but there's no way they'll outrun the goblin surgeon now. Despite the intense pain coursing through him, Clay plants his feet and takes a battle stance. He says he'll hold the goblin off long enough for Takeru to escape because no matter what, he refuses to let his friend die out here. Takeru is genuinely moved by Clay's determination, so he suddenly asks if those scars on his back carry any emotional significance. Clay thinks it's a strange question to ask in the middle of a battle, but replies that the scars only serve as a painful reminder of his past failures, so he hates them with every fiber of his being. Takeru takes that as a sign that he wouldn't mind if they were erased, and before Clay has the chance to ask what he means, Takeru pulls out a vial of Voldius' enchanted water and splashes it onto him. He then casts full-body healing magic over Clay, intending to erase the scars completely. However, it ends up triggering an unexpected side effect because while the scars do disappear, it also causes Clay to evolve, turning his body pitch black. Neither of them has a clue what just happened. Clay is stunned by the transformation, but the pain from his old wounds has vanished, and he suddenly feels stronger, far beyond what he thought possible. Driven by adrenaline and curiosity, he charges at the goblins to test his new strength. And within seconds, he annihilates the entire enemy horde effortlessly without even breaking a sweat. At night, Clay visits Takeru's room and he's reverted back to his usual appearance, but he can still feel a powerful energy simmering inside him. He demands to know what exactly Takeru did to him earlier, so Takeru casually explains that he used some ancient dragon magic water as a catalyst and followed it up with healing magic. Clay stares at him baffled and asks how in the world he even knows an ancient dragon. Takeru reveals that Voldius is actually B's father, so technically, B is an ancient dragon too. Clay sits down, overwhelmed by what he's just heard. He's deeply thankful for what Takeru did for him. But it's clear that no ordinary person could pull off something like that, so he looks Takeru straight in the eye and asks who he really is. Takeru hesitates for a moment, realizing he may have revealed a bit too much, but then again, no one ever told him he had to keep it secret, and Clay's someone he trusts. So he decides to be honest and tells Clay that he's not from this world. Clay freezes, unsure if Takeru is being serious or joking. Takeru sits him down and walks him through the entire story, his reincarnation, his journey, and everything in between. Clay finds it almost too absurd to be true, but considering all the supernatural things Takeru's done so far, it actually starts to make a weird kind of sense. He promises to keep Takeru's origins secret, but warns him to be more careful in the future, because casually modifying someone's body isn't exactly a minor thing. The following day, we see Takeru accompanied by a young woman named Ribble, who happens to be the one managing the shop. He asks if she happens to have any gatherer scissors in stock, as his current pair is worn down, but she unfortunately informs him that she doesn't carry those. However, she does know a highly skilled blacksmith who could craft a new pair for him, though in return he'll need someone to collect specific materials first. Takeru expresses interest in hearing the job details, so Ribble starts guiding him toward her boss's workshop. As they make their way through the halls, Takeru catches sight of several blacksmiths working diligently in the forge. He's clearly impressed by their craftsmanship, and Ribble agrees wholeheartedly, admitting it's why she dreams of becoming a skilled blacksmith herself and forging a legendary blade worthy of a hero someday. Eventually, they arrive at the workshop, and Ribble proposes the idea of having Takeru gather some Ildra ore, the rare mineral required to forge the sword. But her boss shuts it down instantly, saying there's no way he's letting a gatherer venture into those damn mines. Ribble pushes back, suggesting he should at least consider it, and the two begin arguing while Takeru remains confused, having never even heard of Ildra ore. The boss explains that his refusal is due to the mines being infested with monsters, and there are even rumors of demons lurking deep inside, so he can in good conscience let Takeru take that risk. Ribble admits that the number of miners has recently dropped, but the boss figures she conveniently left that part out when talking to Takeru. He tells her bluntly that any blacksmith willing to endanger others for personal ambition has no right to wield a hammer. Realizing her mistake, Ribble sincerely apologizes to Takeru and tells him to just forget about it. But despite the risk, he still seems intrigued and asks whether Ildra ore is truly the only material capable of making the sword. Ribble confirms that it is, so Takeru offers to gather the ore in return for a specially crafted pair of scissors. The boss turns to him and asks if he even paid attention when they mentioned the monster threat, but Takeru calmly replies that he's capable of handling anything down there, so they shouldn't worry. To prove it, he pulls out one of the crab claws he's kept with him. a beast even B-rank adventurers would hesitate to face. And seeing that, the boss begins to realize Takeru might actually be up to the task. Takeru heads out right away toward the Ryuhai mines, and during the trip, the other passengers in the carriage begin chatting about how odd it is that all the poisonous herbs in the region vanish overnight. Takeru grows a little uneasy, suspecting he may be the cause for overharvesting, but he quickly brushes the thought aside. A short while later, the carriage drops him off, and he notices he's near a horse farm, so he decides to take a quick look around. While there, he spots the elf girl he encountered earlier, and it looks like she's in the middle of a disagreement with the farm owner. She apparently requested a white horse that could soar through the sky, but the farmer is now showing her a massive raven instead. The farmer explains that in this area, the word horse is used more as a general term than a literal one. Basically, anything that can carry cargo qualifies as a horse, whether it's an actual horse or a freaking giant bird. Realizing the misunderstanding was her fault for not being more specific, the elf apologizes for causing a scene. The farmer assures her it's not a big issue, but if what she truly wants is a white Pegasus, then her best bet would be to look in the Dwarven Kingdom. Without any hesitation or preparation, she immediately sets out in that direction. Meanwhile, Takeru resumes his journey, and as he walks through the forest, he notices the area is full of valuable plant ingredients. He even stumbles upon a patch of moongrass and takes a few minutes to collect some. But just as he's about to leave, he hears a familiar low growl coming from nearby. When he goes to investigate, he finds the same elf girl from earlier slumped against a tree, once again on the brink of starvation. He quickly gives her some food and water, which she gratefully accepts. She then extends her hand to thank him with a handshake, but she still reeks terribly, and Takeru decides he's had enough of the damn stench, so he casts clean on her to freshen her up. She introduces herself as Vereda Brolite and sincerely thanks him for helping her now and for what he did before. Takeru tells her there's no need for thanks and turns to leave, but Brolite stops him, saying she wants to repay his kindness. Takeru explains he didn't help her expecting any reward. Still in that case, Brolite insists on traveling with him to assist however she can. Though Takeru tries to decline, she won't take no for an answer, so he ultimately lets her tag along. Over the next few hours, Takeru continues collecting herbs from the forest, and Brolite does her best to help, though she mostly ends up gathering a bunch of completely useless stuff, like shit literally. After a while, it comes time to set up camp, so Brolite offers to gather some firewood. Takeru tells her there's no need, as he already has a few fire magic stones he can use instead. Brolite points out that it's important to leave signs of a real campfire in places like this because it helps let other travelers know the spot is safe to rest. Takeru admits she makes a valid point, so Brolite disappears into the woods, and not long after, she returns carrying a massive log slung over her shoulder. Takeru tells her they can't exactly burn something that large for firewood, but Brolite simply replies that she's not finished yet. Without hesitation, she tosses the log into the air, draws her blades, and slices it into dozens of smaller pieces in a single swift motion. Takeru is genuinely impressed, not just by her technique, but also by the fact that her weapons are A-rank, which is a first for him to see up close. Later that night, Takeru prepares a pot of soup, and the moment Brolite tastes it, she's completely stunned because she's never had anything so delicious before. As they enjoy their meal, she asks if he's heading to the Dwarf Kingdom too, so Takeru replies that he's on a mission to gather Ildra ore from the Ryuhai mines located there. And as for Brolite, she explains that she's on a quest to find a white Pegasus because it's her sister's biggest wish to see one, and she's determined to make that happen. That being said, she's just enjoyed another delicious dinner thanks to him, which means her debt has grown even more, and she insists she must repay him. So Takeru asks if he can hire her as a bodyguard, since there's still a lot about adventuring he's unfamiliar with. Brolite gladly accepts, saying she'd be more than happy to protect him. And for the first time, Takeru realizes that when she's not half-starved or collapsing from exhaustion, Brolite actually looks quite beautiful. Unfortunately, he doesn't get much sleep that night because both Bee and Brolite snore incredibly loudly, making it nearly impossible to rest. The next morning, they continue on their journey until they spot the Dwarven Kingdom just across the river. Once they arrive, they head straight to a nearby tavern to enjoy some of the local cuisine. They're served a dish of roasted meat wrapped in jupes, a Dwarven specialty. Takeru tries it and instantly falls in love with the taste, and Brolite agrees it's just as good as her friend described. Curious, Takeru asks what kind of friend she's referring to, and she explains that it was a lizardman she once knew. He laughs, saying what a coincidence that is because he also knows a lizardman, and coincidentally, he's been sitting right behind them this entire time. Takeru is caught off guard to see Clay here, and Clay immediately asks why Takeru left town without giving him any prior notice. Takeru proceeds to explain the entire situation, and although Clay understands, he points out that Takeru's current rank is still too low to officially take on a task like gathering Ildra ore from the mines, meaning he won't be able to submit it to the guild for proper evaluation. He then asks if Takeru is at least getting a decent reward for his efforts, and Takeru replies that Grusus has agreed to craft a high-quality pair of scissors for him in return for the ores. Clay is momentarily speechless, clearly thinking that's a lopsided deal, but Takeru insists that a reliable pair of scissors is crucial for any serious gatherer. If Takeru genuinely feels satisfied with that as his only compensation, Clay sees no reason to argue. However, he says he'd like to tag along on the mission. He was already planning to head into the city to get his spear repaired anyway, so he suggests Takeru just consider it a slight detour. But before Takeru has the chance to turn him down, Berlin unexpectedly chimes in, suggesting Clay take on the role of Takeru's bodyguard as well, so it seems like Takeru is now stuck with their company, whether he likes it or not. The following day, they make their way to the gates of Vosrol, and they're met with a lengthy line outside, so it looks like they'll be waiting quite a bit to get in. That is until Takeru notices Clay speaking with the guards nearby, and a few minutes later they're waved past the crowd and granted direct entry, thanks to Clay's reputation. Once they're inside the city, one of the guards pulls Clay aside to deliver a message. The king is requesting an audience with him. This completely surprises Takeru because he had no idea Clay was on a first-name basis with the ruler of the Dwarf Kingdom. Clay brushes it off, saying the story is kind of long, but the guard interrupts and says it's actually pretty straightforward. Apparently, Clay once saved them from the Thunder King Zengum, and ever since he's been celebrated across the kingdom as a hero. Clay, however, insists he didn't actually do much. The dwarves are master craftsmen when it comes to forging weapons, but unfortunately, they weren't able to wield them effectively to defend themselves, which left them vulnerable to being enslaved by a demon. Then one day, Clay just happened to be passing through, and as soon as the demon saw him, it turned and fled without a fight. That moment alone was enough for the dwarves to declare him their savior. They even went as far as erecting a statue in his honor, though apparently sculpting isn't their strong suit, because the final result looks more like a freaking T-Rex than Clay himself. A short time later, Clay and the others make their way to the castle to meet with King Zorwadin. As soon as they arrive, Clay immediately demands to know who thought it was a good idea to make a statue of him that looks like that. Zorwadin replies with a laugh, saying he just thought it looked cool that way. Takeru quickly picks up on the fact that Clay and Zorwadin seem to have a close relationship, but he needs to cut into their banter because there's something important he has to deliver to the king. A letter of introduction from Grusas, essentially requesting permission for Takeru to enter the mines. The king says that under normal circumstances he wouldn't have an issue with it, but a few months ago the mine became infested with an alarming number of demons, so he's concerned for Takeru's safety. He asks if Takeru is truly willing to proceed despite knowing the risks, and Takeru assures him that he is, so the king grants them permission to go in and investigate what's causing the sudden demon presence. Clay acknowledges the assignment without hesitation, but Takeru is left stunned since tracking down demons wasn't exactly part of the plan. Eventually, they arrive at the mine entrance, where the head receptionist from the local guild unlocks the gate to let them through. Takeru casts a light spell to brighten the tunnel ahead, but from what he can see, there aren't many ores around this area, so he asks the guide if they can head in a bit deeper. The guide agrees, but suddenly B senses a threat approaching. Takeru quickly activates his scan ability and detects that they're under attack by two massive spiders. Clay immediately steps in and drives his spear straight through the first spider's mouth, while Takeru uses magic to immobilize the second one, buying enough time for Brolite to rush in and carve it apart. And with the immediate threat dealt with, the group presses on. As they continue further into the mine, the magical pressure grows stronger, and Takeru starts to spot faint traces of Ildra ore embedded in the rock walls. Unfortunately, the samples are too small to be of any real use. Just then, he notices something deeply buried in the stone, so he fires off a blast of explosion magic to break it loose, revealing a massive ore vein. It's not Ildra ore, but something even rarer and more valuable, prompting the guy to tell him that this is a remarkable discovery. But just as they begin to take it in, he suddenly warns Takeru that something else is closing in. The guide goes pale, eyes widening as he realizes it's a demon. After taking a closer look, Takeru calmly tells the group to stand back because he plans to handle this one solo. Not because he holds a grudge against demons, but because this particular demon is actually a giant crab, and both he and B are already thinking about how good it's going to taste. Takeru then calls out to B, asking for some cover fire while he charges in to attack, but he makes sure to warn B not to use any fire or lightning spells, since they don't want to ruin any of that precious crab meat. B responds with a sonic scream that disorients the creature, giving Takeru a chance to dash in and slam it over the head with his staff. But this crab is a lot tougher than the ones he's fought before, and it smacks him across the face. Still, Takeru is not backing down, and the crab tries to crush him underfoot, but he quickly rolls out of the way, and B seizes the moment to freeze one of its legs in place. That sparks an idea, so Takeru forms a barrage of ice needles and launches them at the crab, freezing it solid on the spot. Brolite is blown away by how quickly Takeru managed to bring the beast down, but Clay is absolutely fuming, and he demands to know why Takeru went after the thing solo. Takeru admits he might have gotten a little ahead of himself, and says he didn't want Clay or Brolite stepping in because if they used their nasty weapons, it might ruin the meat. Clay is stunned that Takeru actually intends to eat the monster. Still, he sets that aside and reminds Takeru that he's here as his bodyguard, which means it's his job to fight and protect him no matter what. He urges Takeru to start relying on his teammates more often, and even though Takeru had no real trouble dealing with the crab on his own, he acknowledges Clay's point and offers a sincere apology, promising to count on him more in the future. Clay is happy to hear it, and says that if Takeru plans on eating the crab, they better get started dragging out of there. Sometime later, Takeru and the others have moved the crab's body and are now busy mining. They've already cleared out the visible gems, but Takeru thinks there's a decent shot they might uncover a bigger ore vein if they keep digging. The guide accompanying them is beyond grateful because Takeru didn't just take out the demon that had been terrorizing the mines, he also helped discover a fresh supply of valuable resources. And the guide has no idea how they'll ever repay him. Eventually, Takeru and his group return to the castle to meet with the king, and Zambo takes the lead in reporting their success. The king listens in amazement as Zambo goes over Takeru's achievements, and as proof of the story, Zambo encourages Takeru to show him the crab monster he caught. Takeru checks to make sure if he really wants to see it, and once the king nods, he opens his item box and sets the massive crab down right in front of him. The king is stunned by the sheer size of the monster and tells Takeru he definitely deserves a reward for handling it so well, so Takeru asks if he can keep the crab's body as his reward. The king finds the request a little odd, but he has no objections and happily agrees. After some time, Takeru and the others exit the castle, and both he and B are practically drooling at the thought of the mouth-watering crab feast waiting for them. And above all that, its sturdy shell will make an excellent base material for the pair of scissors Takeru requested earlier, so overall the trip ended up being a big win for him. And things get even better the following morning when the king has a white Pegasus prepared as a gift for Brelite since he heard she'd been searching for one. The king also had Clay's spear reforged and upgraded, and he's clearly satisfied with the result. Brelite announces that she needs to head home as the Pegasus is technically a gift from her sister, and she expresses her heartfelt thanks to Takeru for everything he's done. He tries to brush it off and tells her it was nothing, but she insists that she'll find a way to repay him, even if it takes her a lifetime. Afterwards, Takeru and Clay return to the guild, and Ariana greets them the moment they step through the door. She's relieved to see Takeru back safely, but she's caught off guard when she notices Clay with him, so she immediately asks if the two of them have formed a party. Takeru is about to explain that they just ran into each other by chance, but before he can say a word, Clay cuts in and confidently declares that they have indeed formed a party. Ariana lights up at the news, and before Takeru can correct her, she's already off to inform the guildmaster. Takeru turns to Clay and asks why he'd say something like that, but Clay shrugs and says there's no harm in it. He knows Takeru is not your average human, and he clearly has a knack for stumbling into all kinds of trouble, so Clay figures someone's got to be around to keep him in check. As much as Takeru dislikes being cornered into things, he admits to himself that having Clay as a partner might not be so bad after all. The two of them then sit down for a proper chat, and before long, they officially agree to form a party, which they call the Azure Black Brigade. After that, Takeru heads over to the smithy to drop off the materials he gathered. And the moment the shop owner lays eyes on all the raw Ildra Takeru brought in, he's absolutely floored. Takeru begins to worry that something might be off, so he had assumed that bringing pure Ildra would be more valuable than regular Ildra ore. But now he's beginning to doubt himself. He asks if they'll still be able to complete the project using the Ildra he delivered, and both Ribble and Gruses are instantly moved to tears. They never imagined they'd ever get their hands on such an untainted form of Ildra. Takeru feels relieved that they're pleased with what he brought, though he certainly wasn't expecting such an emotional reaction. Once the two finally compose themselves, they turn to Takeru and explain that while they're incredibly grateful, there's simply no way they could afford to pay him for the full value of this much pure Ildra. But Takeru quickly tells them not to worry about money, since what he really wants is a custom-made pair of scissors forged just for him. And before they get started on that, he asks them to use this Ildra to craft the finest sword they've ever made, one worthy of winning the upcoming swordsmithing contest. About 2 weeks later, Takeru is at the tavern enjoying a cold mug of beer when he's suddenly interrupted by Wade. Wade says someone important is looking for him, and they left behind a letter requesting a meeting. Clay takes one glance at the seal on the envelope and immediately recognizes it as the crest of the House of Lusilvach. Wade goes on to explain that the letter is from the local lord himself, and Takeru doesn't like where this is going, because it already sounds like the kind of headache he'd rather avoid. He starts thinking up excuses to dodge the meeting, but Wade reassures him that while the man is a noble, he's not the uptight or overbearing type, so there shouldn't be any trouble. Trusting Wade's judgment, Takeru opens the letter to see what it says. Inside is a formal invitation for both Takeru and Clay to visit the Lord's manor so he can personally bestow honors upon them. Clay is caught off guard that his name was included too, but Wade explains that the Lord likely heard the two of them had recently formed a party and decided to invite them as a pair. While the idea of being honored sounds nice on the surface, Takeru has a feeling this whole ceremony is just a convenient excuse to get him to show up. Clay agrees, suggesting that the real reason for the invitation might be B. Since baby dragons are extremely rare, the Lord probably just wants to lay eyes on one. That idea sets Takeru on edge, and he doesn't want to risk someone trying to take B away from him. But Wade assures him that the Lord wouldn't pull anything like that, and more importantly, he doesn't even have the authority to claim someone's pet. Takeru's still a bit uneasy, but after thinking it over, he decides to go, so he and Clay hop into the noble's carriage and head toward the manor for the meeting. As they head toward the manor, Takeru starts to notice that a lot of people are staring, but Clay tells him that's perfectly normal. After all, it's not every day someone gets summoned to the Lord's estate. Takeru asks why that is, and Clay explains that if the Lord chooses to back you, your entire career as an adventurer can shift dramatically for the better, so it's something almost every adventurer dreams about. Once they arrive, Takeru is struck by how massive and elegant the manor is. At the front entrance, they're greeted by Raymond, the head butler of the estate. He politely welcomes them and leads them inside, right past the grand foyer. Takeru spots a line of maids waiting to greet them, and he's genuinely impressed by how polished and coordinated everything seems. As they approach the staircase, a man walks by, but rather than acknowledging their presence, he throws them a dismissive glance and carries on like they're invisible. Takeru brushes it off because he's not easily rattled by rude behavior, but just a moment later, a young girl suddenly darts down the stairs and starts demanding that he hand over B, saying she wants him for herself. Takeru coolly replies that there's no chance of that happening, and the girl looks stunned, like no one's ever told her no before. She begins lecturing him about how dragons are noble creatures and that, as such, only someone like her should be allowed to own one. But she's clearly reciting something she was told to memorize. While she's rambling, Takeru opens her status window and sees that her name is Tyrus, the Lord's daughter. She doesn't strike him as a bad kid, so he kneels down and gently asks her why she believes she deserves B in the first place. Tyrus becomes slightly flustered and admits that Bernard told her all adventurers are beneath nobles, and that if you give them an order, they have no choice but to follow. That explains a lot, and it's clear Bernard has been filling her head with nonsense. But Takeru doesn't have a clue who that guy is. For now, he calmly tells Tyrus that B isn't just a pet, he's part of his family, and there's nothing in the world that would convince him to give him up. When Tyrus hears him say that, something clicks. She finally understands that asking Takeru to give away B is like someone demanding she give up her own family, and she knows she could never do something like that. Curious, Takeru asks why she wanted a dragon so badly in the first place. Tyrus quietly explains that she hoped to show one to her mother, because it's one of her mother's deepest wishes, but just thinking about it fills her with sadness. At that moment, a man approaches, notices the gloomy look on Tyrus's face, and gently asks her, "What's the matter, baby girl?" Tyrus turns toward him and calls him daddy, so Takeru quickly realizes this must be the Lord, and he's honestly taken by surprise since he'd been imagining some bald, chubby old guy instead. The man gives his name as Belminant, and once they sit down together for tea with Takeru and Clay, he offers an apology for his daughter's earlier rude attitude. Takeru waves it off and says it's no big deal, and Clay then asks Belminant why he called them there, so the Lord explains that it concerns his wife Muleteria. He continues explaining that his wife has been confined to bed for the past 6 months, and that he recently heard stories about Takeru curing a weak, near-death man in a single night, so he began to hope that Takeru might be able to help her using that same power. Takeru knows his magic is potent enough to fix most illnesses, but the last time he pushed it that far, Clay ended up evolving, so he's nervous about what might happen if he uses it on Muleteria. Bellman goes on saying that the reason Tyrus wanted Takeru's dragon is that in a few days she has to return to her academy in the royal capital, and she thought that if she left a cute little creature beside her mother, it might cheer her up. She might get carried away sometimes, but at heart she's a kind girl, and this whole story brings both Clay and B to tears, so Takeru finally agrees to help, even though he's still scared it might cause problems for him later. Belminant is thrilled when he hears that Takeru is willing to help, so he escorts him to his wife's room and tells her that he has brought someone who might be able to heal her. First, Takeru uses his scan on her, and when he checks the status window, he realizes her condition is even worse than he imagined. Her status is basically a long list of life-threatening problems. For example, she's suffering from severe cataracts, anemia, kidney poisoning, liver poisoning, and that's only the start. It's honestly a miracle she's even still alive, but he's confident he can cure most of those conditions. Yet there's something in her status called Ivor poisoning, and he's never encountered it before, so he's not sure if his magic can deal with that shit. Even so, he won't know for sure until he tries, so he asks Belminant if he's willing to entrust his wife's life to him, and both the Lord and Muleteria quietly agree to place their full faith in Takeru's hands. This was the end of episode 6. Subscribe to not miss the next episode.
Take you